So Shadowcat has been the biggest surprise for me in Marvel Champions so far. Hey everybody, I'm Nelson. This is Nelson All Over Cards, and today we're taking a look and a deep dive into Shadowcat or Kitty Pryde coming from the Mutant Genesis box. So I've played a couple of games with Shadowcat on stream. I got through the 4 games in each one of the aspects. We're going to talk about kind of her hero, her kit, what she does. We're going to figure out some cards that we like in her deck build, and then rank her aspects in terms of what she's least good in to best good in. Throw it all into the overall ranking of Marvel Champions heroes so we can get a full picture of what Shadowcat is. So Shadowcat in her alter ego has a 3 recovery as well as a 6 hand size. Her ability is phase control, and she's able to flip her mass form once per round. We're going to talk about mass form here in 1 second, but before we do that, let's talk about her hero side. So she has a really solid 2/2/2 stat line with 5 hand size, and her passive ability, which is called Selective Intangibility, allows her to bypass Guard, Patrol, and Crisis while she is in phased form. The solid phase form, her mass form upgrade, is her whole shtick, and it's really good. I'm gonna try and refrain from saying it's really solid just because I've been using that pun a lot. I think it's a really good pun, but it's also kind of thrown me off because I keep using that same one. So it's a really good form. It's a really good upgrade. So in her solid form, which is what you started in, you have the ability to exhaust the card and generate a physical resource for either an attack or a defense event. It has a response, not a forced response, saying that after you attack or defend, you are able to flip into phased form. Phased form says that you cannot take damage while defending. Boom! Crazy, right? Okay, so you can't take damage while defending. However, you must flip. It's a forced response to flip after you attack or defend back into solid form. So I love the dynamics that this creates. It's really cool that it's an optional response to flip into phase, but it's a forced response to flip out of phase. And so this creates some timing decisions that are really fun and really puzzly. So she gets very interesting because you do want to end your turn going into the villain form in phased form, so you can defend either by playing a card or exhausting to do so to negate all damage. It makes it so you really do have to plan ahead. She's a very thinky hero and very intriguing and way more fun than I actually thought she was going to be when I first initially saw her kit. Let's talk about some of her cards in her kit. So she has the ability, Selective Intangibility, to ignore Guard, Patrol, Crisis, and she gets rewarded by doing so with 2 different upgrades. She has Acute Control and Intangible Interference. So this gives you a slight benefit to bypass the Crisis or Guard, whereas you can deal damage if you bypass Guard, or you can remove threat from the Crisis icon, or the Crisis scheme that you have bypassed. So it's really nice if it is a factor that you're playing. In the 4 games that I played against Claw, who has a lot of Crisis, has a lot of Guard. So it's really cool to showcase those abilities. If anything else, it's just a card to get out of your deck, to thin your deck down so that you can be hitting your really great events more frequently. But if it works, if it's in a scenario that it does actually matter, it's incredible. It's really nice. But her kit very much functions without these cards as well. One of her key cards is called Shadowcat Surprise. So this is one of her mid-range attack cards. It's a 2-cost attack event for 3 damage, and you get to ready Shadowcat. So this card combined with Ready to Rumble is why she can be so deadly if her thwart or attack are pumped up. So like Heroic Intuition or a Combat Training. She has so many ways to ready that she is able to just activate multiple times, because with Ready to Rumble you have such control over when you are flipping and being able to trigger the stand up. Ready to Rumble says whenever you change forms you get to ready your hero. And then also with Shadowcat Surprise, having multiple copies of that in her deck allows her to stand up. So bumping her stats up is very good because you can get multiple activations each turn. Let's talk about her incredibly strong thwart event. It's called Airwalk. It's a 1-cost superpower. It removes 2 threat, or if you are in phased form, it removes 4 threat. Remember, she does have Selective Intangibility, allowing her to bypass any Crisis icons. This is not limited to the main scheme, and it is just a epic card in single player because 4 threat can do so much for 1 cost, especially, and we'll talk about this here in a second. You can reduce the cost with Def Focus, and it's just a really excellent card, especially because you do want to be in phased form at least every turn, because you want to be ending your turn in phased form. So giving you access to 4 threat mitigation is game changing. It really can be. You can clear a side scheme, you can clear the main scheme, being able to roll down. Airwalk is very strong. And then her big attack is called Phase Strike. Phase Strike is a 3 cost attack for 6 damage, which isn't super great for a hero card, but it does allow you to get rid of an attachment on an enemy that has the hero response or hero action keyword printed on it. So this is fairly situationally useful. It's not horrible damage, like it is nice damage for 3 cost. And if you are running in a scenario or a mod set that has a lot of these attachments, then this can be really good, because if you're in phase form, you can remove those attachments. You can strip something off that would take 3 resources. Like, think about just like removing We Are One from Venom Goblin for just a 3 cost 6 damage activation. That is incredibly good. Again, that benefit is pretty situational depending on the villain / mod set that you're running, but when you need it, it's incredible payoff for its value. And then my favorite card in her kit, and the last one that we're going to be talking about in this video, is Quick Shift. So this is a 0 cost defense card, which if you have watched my videos before, you know I love it. 0 cost defense card, so it does count as you defending, being if you are in phase form, you're not going to take any damage. And it says while you're in phase form, you get to draw 2 cards. So no damage plus 2 card draw, so you're plus 1 card. And then if you are in solid form, you get to flip to phase form, meaning that you don't take any damage either. So with this card, it's a perfect defense. It's a backflip. That's what it is. Now, if you play it in phase form, you will switch into solid form at that point, but that's not the end of the world, because then you have the ability to pay for a card using its resource printed on there, and you have 2 cards. I mean, it's having 2 of these in her kit is so incredibly strong. So I love this card. Wow. Great design, great design. So let's talk about some of the basic cards that she really likes in her kit. The main one being Ready to Rumble. And we already kind of talked about this a little bit. She has an incredible stat line with the 222, and being able to have so much control on when you're able to flip. Ant-Man has this, Wasp has this, where you can choose to flip once per turn. She's not limited to once per turn. So she's able to, say, attack in solid form. She can then, she's exhausted at that point, she can then flip her phase, or flip into phased form as a response, triggering Ready to Rumble, readying her up. She can at that point either attack or thwart or do anything she wants to with her basic activations. Or even if you didn't want to, say if you were exhausted and you played a Shadowcat surprise, that would ready you up, and you can keep Ready to Rumble on the table. She just has so many ways and so much flexibility around being able to ready that this stat line, this 222 stat line, is incredible. The other basic card that I'm going to mention is Def Focus. So 9 out of her 15 cards are superpower traded that cost more than 0. She does, I think that's 11 cards total that are superpower. 2 of those are 0 cost, so don't really count that in the economy that Def Focus can provide. But really, having a quarter of your deck being discounted by Def Focus is all the more reason to just run Def Focus. So let's talk about the aspects. So we're going to rank the aspects in order from least strongest to best, and I will call out my favorite aspect once we get there, although with that defense card, you may already know what that is. So in 4th place, leadership, and I do at this point probably sound like a broken record, but just with not a lot of blue X-Men allies, you're kind of hindered in what you can do in blue at this point. However, she does open up cards like Moxie, Morale Boost, and R&D Facility, and these are really good to bump her stats up to get multiple activations each turn. So instead of building like an ally heavy leadership build, I like to go more with the bump up the stats of the hero, and then try and get as many readies from that as I possibly can. Because with a Moxie, a morale boost, and R&D facility on the table, right there, you're already at a 5 attack or a 5 thwart, allowing you a lot of flexibility. So it can be really explosive turns. It does take a while to set up. She has a lot of stall built into her kit without being able to take damage in phase form, so it's a viable strategy. In solo play, the other aspects just work so much better than leadership, but that is the route that I have found to actually have an okay build in leadership. In third place, we have Justice. So she has so much ability in her kit to keep threat down with Airwalk, and also if you're in phased and you don't want to attack because that will flip you into solid right before you go into the villain phase, you can thwart. So right there, you probably are already going to be thwarting for 2, plus Airwalk is 4. So her threat mitigation in her kit, it does not need to be shored up by Justice. So in a solo play, which this is what we're talking about solo, is Justice is already just adding to her strength. So kind of what we've talked about before is if a hero already has a really strong ability for thwarting or attacking and you want to lean into that, you absolutely can do so. And you can do that in Justice with like pivotal moments, meaning that you get to deal 5 damage for a 2 cost. If there's no threat on the main scheme, you can run cards like Venom to benefit you doing a good job, and so that is a way to go. One way or another is always going to be really strong with heroes that have high threat mitigation in their kit, but she doesn't really have a lot of need for that to be included. The one last thing I will say is Heroic Intuition can be really solid. There it is again. I just like have it at this point. Heroic Intuition can be really good in her kit because of how many activations she gets, and she can increase that thwart by 50%, and it can be pretty critical to wiping the board. I found that this is a little bit stronger in multiplayer than it is in solo play because a lot of the times 3 threat mitigation with excellent threat cards or thwarting cards in her kit can sometimes be overkill. So that's why Justice is in third place. In second place, we have the red aspect, which is aggression. So you can load her up with a lot of attack events, and then you can really consistently make sure that you're going to be in phase form going into the villain phase, meaning that you won't be taking damage, meaning that you can stay in hero form to do more damage. So I love the aggression build with her. It's not my favorite, but it is incredibly fun. Unlike Justice, where too much thwart can be an issue, too much damage with like a combat training cannot be an issue. So Shadowcat, with all of the readies that she has in a combat training, she'll be swinging for a 3, and if you have ready to rumbles, Shadowcat surprises, you can put out a significant amount of damage, especially if you combine that with surprise attack. So surprise attack is such an excellent card for Shadowcat because when you flip after, so basic activation to attack, if you have a combat training, that's already 3 damage. You are forced to flip into your solid form, meaning that you have changed forms and can activate cards like Surprise Attack. Surprise Attack does 3 damage for 1 cost after you change forms, or if you pay for it with a physical resource, it does 4 damage, and just because you've been forced to flip into solid, you now have a physical resource generator on the table, being able to trigger a 4 attack for something you start with on the table. The other thing about surprise attack is that this is not limited to the hero phase. Because it is a response whenever you change form. You can use this during the villain phase after defending. And I love using this. If you defend against the villain attack, you take no damage, flip into solid form, use a surprise attack to take out a minion before their activation. So you can hit the villain. That's always a good call. 4 damage to the villain in solo is a significant amount of damage. But if you can use that 4 damage to snipe a minion before they're able to activate, it's saving you even more health, allowing you to stay in hero form and continue on just throwing a beat down to the villain. Her aggression build is incredibly fun. It's so puzzly because there are so many times where you're playing attack events in solid form that you don't want to be flipping to phase. It's a optional response. It's not forced to flip into phased. And so you can time it out saying, I'm going to play 2 attack events and a basic activation, and then I get to ready from Ready to Rumble. And so right there, you can start counting and figuring out when you do want to flip, and make sure you flip into phased for that last activation so you can go in to the villain phase laissez-faire, not taking any damage, and ready to go when you do defend. You're right back into solid. You can go face with the villain next turn. That leads us to our best aspect, and also my favorite, which, no surprise to anyone, this is protection. So she doesn't take any damage during phased form. Do I have to say any more? This is an incredible perfect defense build. So all you have to do is make sure that you're going into the villain phase in phased, and then load your deck with the defense events and flow like water. Make sure that you throw all the upgrades in there that are needed whenever you don't take any damage, so like unflappable, hard to ignores, all of that stuff, and then just play the game in the villain phase. Because at that point, anytime you play a defense card, you're considered the defender, you cannot take damage, so like Defiance here, incredible value. A 0-cost card to negate all damage. I'll take that every single day. Then you get to trigger electrostatic armor, flow like water. You get to draw a card from unflappable. You get to remove 3 threat if you have 3 hard to ignores on the table. The consistency in which she can absolutely make sure she's not taking damage means that she may be one of the best perfect defense heroes that we have to date, if not the best. She's incredible. Vision has the issue that he is not allowed to defend when he is reducing all damage by 2. She doesn't have that restriction. So just she has so much flexibility in green, and then you're probably not going to be taking a lot of damage, so you can run cards like Fighting Fit and Dauntless to increase her damage output if you even need it. The one thing that I will say about protection as the downside is minions can be an issue, because you're going to be wanting to defend the villain attack, meaning that you will be in solid form for minion attacks. If you have multiple minions, you can game this a little bit and defend one of those minions and then be in phased form, and then if you are able to maybe play a defense card, you had a Ready to Rumble, you can defend the larger minion, or you can run cards like First Hit or Powerful Punch that can flip you back into phased, or just take out the minion before they even get to activate. So really enjoy the protection build. Probably not a surprise to anybody, but it is incredibly strong. It is incredibly fun to play, and I highly recommend, if you have not tried Shadowcat in protection, please do so. Colossus was the one who came with the protection precon. However, Shadowcat so very quickly eclipses him in the ability that protection can provide. So this is actually one of the first times where my rankings and the community rankings line up exactly. So I'll put the community rankings up here, but they did rank the 4 aspects in the same rankings that I am. And so sometimes we're pretty off on these rankings, but this time we're lined up exactly. And then to combo off that, the community had her ranked as an A tier, and I am going to agree with that. So overall ranking, she's an A tier hero. We're going to slide her right between Ant-Man and Quicksilver. She is incredibly puzzly, so many tactical decisions that are so satisfying. It's very much like you're piloting a hero, but it's not something I would give to a new player, because I do think that it does take a good bit of understanding of the game on planning out your turn, and the tactical decisions can be pretty challenging, and it takes a while once you do play her to kind of understand exactly when and where you want to be flipping. So really puzzly, really satisfying to play. Once you are able to pull off some of these epic turns, like, it's just a avalanche of fun at that point. The ability to ignore, guard, crisis, and patrol does come in handy, but like I was saying before, if the scenario doesn't have it, she is still an A tier hero. She does get bumped up if we start seeing more of that. Like we saw a lot of tough in Mutant Genesis. If we start seeing more crisis or patrol minions, then maybe she will start getting a little bit better. But right now, she is a very solid A, and the biggest surprise in Marvel Champions so far, because I really thought that she was going to be like very, very much a niche hero, where I was only going to be running her against like Claw and Space Pirates. I think Space Pirates is the one with all the patrol, but just like, that's not the case whatsoever. She is so much fun. It's always just, it's the cherry on top if you get to bypass the guard and crisis. but not needed for her power ranking whatsoever. What are your thoughts on Shadowcat? So let me know in the comments what some of your favorite interactions have been with her. Was she a surprise to you as well? Or are you just not a fan of her? Let me know down in the comments, because I always do enjoy reading other people's opinions on these heroes. Also, you can vote on who I play next in my next hero spotlight, so that's also going to be a link down in the video description. If you like this video, please like the video and follow the channel. It does go so very far in helping me put out more of this content and getting it out to more people. So I very much appreciate it when you do that. Thank you for hanging out. Hope you enjoy Kitty Pryde. Go have some fun playing some Marvel Champions, and I'll see you next time. Peace.